So, welcome once more. I would like to deeply apologize for the very, very long delay. It is a rainy evening, and you know how things go when there rains in Nairobi. My name is Mamka Anyona. I am the host of A Certain Amount of Madness podcast, which is co hosting this special town hall session alongside The Big Picture, which is the podcast of Africa Uncensored. I am very honored to be joined in studio today by Tom Mukwana, who is going to work with me in grilling our dear Senator of Kenya from Busia. Is my mic off again? Oh, my God.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Can everybody hear me? Okay, good. As long as you can hear me then. We're joined by Okiya Omtatah, who is a senator of Kenya from the county of Busia, who is a veteran active citizen who has spent many decades in courts, in jails, and elsewhere fighting for Kenyans' rights, and who recently expressed an interest in vying for the presidency of Kenya in this special context where there's a sort of rising civil unrest against what we consider a decaying ruling order. So we are gathered here today in late September 2025, following one of the most eventful years we've ever had in Kenya's sort of political and civic history. In 2024, and we saw it again in 2025, this very sort of active youth uprising across the entire country. That was animated by various sources of unrest amongst the young. But within all of this, the Constitution was the rallying cry. The Constitution of Kenya 2010 has come to be a very dominant, to be the dominant sort of symbol of this particular event of uprising and unrest. And it has also come to symbolize not just the rallying cry of the masses, but it has come to symbolize the central promise of our country, of fulfilling the promise of Kenya. And not only did the Gen Z go to the streets armed with, very intricate knowledge of the Constitution, much more so than one would even expect in, your average country. This has also become the political platform on which a lot of politicians who are coming to ask us for the mandate to govern the country on our behalf, it has also become the platform for a lot of those campaigns, including the one by Okiya Omtatah, who is joining us today. So just a little housekeeping before we begin with the questions. We were intending to have about an hour of Tom and I asking the senator some questions, and then we come to the audience because we really want to make sure that there's time for the audience to interact as much as possible with the senator. And we're going to try and shorten that, but we'll go with the flow. And we want to keep this session as interactive as possible. So just to begin, I will ask the senator to introduce himself to the audience and to tell us, he's one of the people who was lucky enough. I don't expect that in this room there are many people who participated in the process of the writing of this constitution, but I believe he's one of the people who did that. And he can tell us about his experience in the process of agitating for a new constitution, how he participated in the process of this particular constitution, and how the constitution came to be the sort of primary site of struggle for his own campaign that he is now advancing towards the Kenyan people. Welcome, Senator Omtatah.
Good evening. I hope you are doing fine. I'm also doing fine. So, as you have been told, my name is Okiya Omtatah Koiti. I'm the senator elected from the county of Busia. And I've been on earth for quite some time. That's why I happened to be there when the constitution was being done. It was just that I happened to be alive and maybe at an age of when I could participate and engage. And so, to cut a long story short, the thing is that the Constitution is a ceasefire document. It was a ceasefire in two levels. The first one was in the various draft constitutions. A lot of things kept on being dropped. Some things were dropped. Some new things were added. And you have heard of the Naivasha, the infamous Naivasha meeting, where the parliamentary select committee involved the current president changed a big part of the document and even shifted it from a parliamentary to a presidential. Then it proceeded. Then there was the vote. There were people who felt that it needed to be given some. It had lost a lot of its oomph or its power, so they wanted it to be revisited. Others said, no, let us just pass it the way it is. And then when we have passed it, we shall see how to amend it and accommodate. So the people arrived at some arbitrary figure saying that it is 65% good, but that 5% is not good. So it became a ceasefire that at the both levels of the drafting and then at the level of the referendum, because on the referendum decided whichever side was to win, it would carry the day. So the yes side won, and it became the law. So it was not a document that you could say satisfied all the competing interests that were there in the country. And there was also a push from mainly the Americans because of what had happened in 2007, 2008. They did not want us to go to an election with the old constitution. So there's a very big push from the European Union, the Americans, and similar, who really pushed. They said, okay, if it's a lemon, make lemonade. You're better off with the lemonade than nothing. So that's how we ended up with this constitution. It was not really an act of scientific interrogation through and through. So when you read it, you have to realize that it's a ceasefire document. It stopped a war. It stopped a slide down to... So it accommodated various people. It carried many people. We had fights on other things like the Cadiz courts. Eventually, they got their way in. We had fights about many other things that are thrown out. The question of women. In the earlier drafts, there had been a top-up for both parliament and for the county assemblies. But then there was a cutoff. It was to last for only 20 years. After that, affirmative action in elections was to go. The lobby for women was pushed it. The ceasefire position was that the 20-year limit would go away, and then the top-up would only remain in the county assemblies. But in the parliament, they would define how affirmative action would be. And so they gave 47 seats that could only be contested by women in the National Assembly, the women representative. And in the Senate, they gave 18 nominations to women. That is the 16 women top-ups, and then one representing disability, the other one representing youth. So women end up with 18 nominated seats in the Senate. So that's how the affirmative action was then dealt with. But there were a lot of moves. The famous Article 27, Clause 8, which says that whether in appointive or elective position, not more than, was under Article 10 in the last draft. But when the draft that went to the election came, we found it had come to the Bill of Rights. It had been taken from from Article 10 and brought into the Bill of Rights. There had been another one that was then sneaked in when the government printer was printing. That was in Article 24. They said that rights could be limited, because if you look at Article 24, it talks about limitation of rights and says that it has to be justified in a democratic society, and it be listed how you could justify limitation of rights. But at the government printer, somebody added in the word security concerns. So it created another storm again. They had to go and reprint, remove that. So you can see that the contest never entered. Some of us were very bitter in the way the devolution was done, because we felt that the checks for devolution were taken out. So we ended up with a system that could not really work. But we also were able to get our ideological positions in. If you understand civic republicanism and you read the Constitution, you'll realize that civic republicans carry the day. Neoliberals think that they won, but they did not. It's the civic republicans who really won, with the traditional values and the common good as guiding lights. If you look at it, the Constitution is very, very conservative in many ways. So the civic republicans won.
So in that case, Senator, would you say that your support for this constitution and the fact that it is the platform upon which you are advancing your own agenda for running this country is based on the fact that it is ideologically aligned with yourself?
Not necessarily that, but I look at the key areas that tend to cure. One of the things that was major and one that was the real victory for us in this constitution was the definition of sovereignty. Under the old constitution, sovereignty was vested in the president. In the new constitution, sovereignty was vested in the people. That for me was a very, very major turn. And then, as you come down, you'll find that the pleasure doctrine was also destroyed. The pleasure doctrine is whereby people held office at the pleasure of the president. So when you look at Article 236, if you look at Article 236, it's very clear that to remove somebody from office, it has to be due process. You cannot just wake up and announce on a Voice of Kenya on KBC at lunchtime and people are sacked. There has to be due process. So those are the two major things that came in that for me anchor this constitution in a place that puts it very clearly above the others. Then, of course, there are very, very deliberate chapters that were put in the constitution that are not usually constituting principles. Like chapter 12 on public finance is a purely technical chapter on how to manage money. But it was put there because there'd been mischief of abuse of money right from the colonial times. Public money was never respected into the independence. So they'd put in that chapter to try and contain that. You'll find another chapter that's purely technical is the chapter on the elections. If you look at it, they go very detailed, and if you look at the Kriegler report and how they handle that chapter 7 on the elections, you find that they try to move away from the idea of free and fair elections to the emerging concept that emerged from Brazil of tamper-proof elections. Elections that cannot be tampered with, not free and fair elections. So the threshold for elections was raised. So those are among the things that for me are inspiring me. Yeah. But of course, the other things like the common good, if you look at the way security is defined in Article 238, it's defined in a manner that it is ultimately the people to benefit, not the state. So the state is a servant state. So that definition of the state as a servant state for me is also a very, very important installment. Then you go to Article 93, how parliament is defined as a bicameral parliament. You go to Article 129, executive power. Is also defined that executive power must be used to serve the interests of the people. Yeah. So that for me, those particular checks, those very broad checks, are ones that make this constitution very important. Yeah. So that at the end of the day, you find that it's designed in a manner that it protects private property. It allows private property. Yeah. But then it also argues for the common good. And when you have the pursuit of the common good, then you find that market determinism, where they call free markets and whatever, are there, but free markets are not what determine the organization of society.
Yeah.
It's political action that determines the organization of society. So determinism, the market determinism, was sort of contained in an almost quasi-socialist way. Yeah, which is really a civic republican way of dealing with the capitalism, whereby then capitalism must be checked by the common good. We don't want runaway capitalism. But it's private property and you do your work, but then you must, at the end of the day, be contributing to the common good in whatever you do. Even as you get your wealth, you can only get wealth in a legitimate way.
Senator, you make very valid points, and all those are aspects within the Constitution. However, everyone in this room can agree that the text and what we see being implemented are two completely different things. And this goes down to the Constitution being applied depending on who holds the instruments of power. You will agree to a certain extent. But how do you determine or change that aspect of the Constitution? Because the bicameral parliament and it being in existence and the checks and balances that exist within it, those are written in the Constitution. But you're rallying behind this text that is at the discretion of whoever is quote unquote elected into office.
Well, one thing you have to realize that is a constitution that is not self-enforcing. A constitution has to be enforced by people. Look at Eritrea. They made a very beautiful constitution. They proclamated it, but the president put it in the shelf. They've never implemented a single act, not like Kenya. So the issue is this. When we began unbundling the constitution, there was the old culture and the old habits. Remember and the main problem here is that we never got down to the separation of powers. Even though we shifted sovereign authority to the people and delegated power to the institutions, when at that time it was only the National Assembly that was in existence, which did the Public Finance Management Act, with the support of the British Council. The British government played a big role in it. When you come to the way they interpreted Article 225, Clause 1, which establishes the National Treasury, they unbundled that article, they operationalized that article in Section 11 of the Public Finance Management Act, and they conceived of the National Treasury as a ministry of the national government. So they defined the National Treasury. They said the National Treasury is the Cabinet Secretary for Finance, the Principal Secretary for Finance, and the departments, which effectively makes it a ministry. And as you know that in the appointment of the cabinet and the principal secretaries, the pleasure doctrine still governs. They serve at the pleasure of the president. The president can choose to fire his minister today and he has got no recourse. So, as a result of that, the pleasure doctrine running the treasury, it becomes that the president becomes the treasurer. What that does is that then money and executive power are fused. Then you get what you call the imperial president. And the same thing happens at the county, where again money and executive power is fused in the governor, and you can see the runaway impunity in the counties. So what we needed to do is to be faithful to the Chapter 12 and create an independent treasury. This treasury must serve 48 governments. We must never get to a point where, like what we hear the president say at times, that I have sent money to the counties on time. It's not supposed to be the politician sending money to the counties. It's supposed to be a technocrat. So one of the things we must fight to achieve is to hive away the power of money, or as they call it, the power of the purse, away from the executive and put it under the control of parliament in an independent treasury. That way, the budget then becomes the tool of organizing the country, and MPs will regain their power, and they'll be able to negotiate and distribute wealth according to how they negotiate. Right now, it is proximity to the president that unlocks resources. You even had the president the other day when he was in Ukambani. You had him say that Raila amekubali, so mambo inaenda Nyanza. Kalonzo amekataa, so Ukambani is not seeing what Nyanza is seeing. So you can see that attitude that the president is an emperor. So to kill the president, to kill that emperor, we must take money away, leave him with the power, the executive power. And then the design of the constitution is that the president must be a perpetual lobbyist. He should lobby parliament, not wag parliament. The president is the tail. The dog should be parliament. But right now we have a situation whereby the tail is wagging the dog.
Yeah, but Senator, part of the reason this is so, and part of the reason, because a lot of Kenyans have now had a chance to read this constitution, and people understand, or at least have a general knowledge of the letter of the constitution. But this constitution, as you say, it cannot implement itself, and it is implemented within a context. And so even though this constitution is broadly liberal and tries to advance some very liberal sort of a liberal democratic model of governance, it is being implemented in a context that is essentially, for cultural and historical reasons, illiberal. So the majority of Kenyans, while they may be displeased with a lot of what they see, can nevertheless identify with it. They identify with, this is our man, so he must eat. This is our time. So even though the constitution says that we should have this, we should have state offices that represent the diversity of the nation, even though the public finance chapter 12 lays out the separation between the presidency and public finance. The constitution is being implemented in a context with very strong illiberal tendencies in which the majoritarian tend to identify with these unconstitutional ways of the constitution being implemented. So if you were to become president today, how would you force the hand of the people, the civil servants with whom you will serve? How will you force the hand over people who may not necessarily, at a very sort of core level, identify with the sort of principles that are in the spirit of this constitution?
Well, it's a very, very simple thing, extremely simple, because I believe in design. I will not try to be a messiah. I believe in design. So the first thing I'll do is to kill the imperial presidency through an executive order. On the day I'm sworn in, I'll issue an executive order establishing an independent treasury and appointing a temporary treasurer so that I cannot have access to money the way I want. And once that is done, we can go ahead and get an act of parliament. During the campaign, we are going to develop a complete bill on how to set up an independent treasury. Get an act of parliament, and hopefully within 3 months, have that thing regularized, and then the executive order will be now backed up, or will now be subsumed into an act of parliament, and we will take money away from the presidency. That's the one thing you do, and you drain the swamp. Because it is that money that buys MPs, it is that money that confuses everybody, and it's that money that must be controlled.
But how would you do that at the county level, for example?
Same at the county level. You'll give an executive order for the treasury to set up, the counties to set up independent county treasurers to be responsible for the county revenue fund. Take that money away from the governor. And those are the things we need to do. Once you do that, the executive will sober up. The person who will be responsible for money will be a technocrat. And you have seen it the other day in the US when the president tried to fire one of the fellows in the Federal Reserve. He was unable. Because they have got security of tenure, they are professionals, they are competitively recruited, and they will not pander to any political persuasions. They will do their work professionally and know that they can do their work professionally. So that for me is what I feel that should be done by anybody who wants to change this country. The most important thing you have to do is to control public money. Once you do that, all other things will fall in place.
Speaking of public money, Senator, we are 11.7 trillion shillings in debt as we speak.
Just call it 12 billion.
Okay, we could round it off to 12. We're well over 12 billion, almost there in public debt. Some of it you've labeled odious. And that's one of the things that you use in your campaign, and most of your interviews, you mentioned the aspect of odious debt and how you'll tackle that. But then that violates what many countries and the IMFs of the world, or Bretton Woods institutions, however you want to call them, call international law. You violating these international laws could have a huge effect on the nation of Kenya. I cannot, in my head, and I believe most people, reconcile how you will do that and keep Kenya in, should I say, good standing internationally.
I think the thing is this: the issue is not to go into it like a bull in a China house. The issue is this: is to get the lenders, who are mainly Western powers, the Western companies, get these lenders across the table, get their governments across the table, demonstrate the violations that have been happening, and tell them we want to pay this money back. This money was taken in the name of our country, but it's in the private accounts, and these private accounts are in your countries. Help us to get this money from those private accounts and give back to the people who lend it to us. I don't think any country can refuse to do that. And also there's a doctrine of odious debt, which was developed by the Americans when they invaded Cuba to kick out the Spaniards.
Yeah.
It works, and it recently in Mozambique over the tuna gate.
Yeah.
They have been able to have a lot of the debt declared not a sovereign debt that does not bind the Mozambican, because a lot of this money is sitting in the West. That's why in the Cayman Islands, wherever they have these secret accounts. So we shall simply follow the paper trail and have this money go back. And if you remember, there was a precedent set in this country over the duty-free shops. When Ali sued Kenya in the tribunal in Washington, that Kenya had irregularly cancelled this contract to run the duty-free shops, one paragraph in his affidavit said that he had bribed Moi to be given the contract. And the Kenyan state did not even have to defend the case, because the judges there asked, is it part of Kenyan public policy to bribe a president to get business? And they said no, and Ali lost the case on the basis of that. So there are precedents that can be followed. It's not a thing that is just going to be rushed. One, we shall quantify the debt, we shall get the borrowers, we'll tell the lenders, okay, you are lending when you knew there was this law that says for Kenya to borrow, we must go through it this way. You decided to come through the window with whoever you are lending. But we want to give you back your money, and we know where this money is. This money is sitting in your capitals in the West, in private accounts. Help us transfer this money from those private accounts back to the lender and write off the debt. That's what we're going to do. If they've been resistant, then we can pursue the doctrine of odious debt, the way Mozambique did. Yeah.
Okay, so...
And also these people are very rich. You can also auction them here and pay the debts. Some of them are very rich right now. Yeah, you can auction their estate locally and pay the debt.
Yeah, I think many people in this room will be happy to hear that. So as we are talking about international law and the sort of imperial order under which we find ourselves, let's just go back to the founding of even this concept of the rule of law in our country. The concept of the rule of law is something we inherited from the colonial times, when the idea of the rule of law was the rule by law to ensure that the pacification of the indigenous people, to allow, the colonial settlers to continue to extract from us and to live amongst us as they wished. And we have somehow inherited that language. And even when you look, last night I was just telling Tom, I sat and for 4 hours straight read the Constitution page to page. And it was some of what I found really fascinating about it is that the language is very, very NGO-ish. It is, when you read it and you don't see the word Kenya there, it is almost indistinguishable from something written in any of the institutions you have mentioned, such as the British Council, you've mentioned the Americans, you've mentioned the EU. So, we know that these processes were funded by a lot of donors who had their own interests, as you have said, and as we witnessed. And so all the way from the colonial laws that we received to this particular constitution that was written with a lot of support, or some might call it interference, by external powers. Would it be correct to say that Kenyans have never truly written their own constitution?
Well, who are these Kenyans? If you are talking of Kenyans as Turkanas, Kikuyus, Luyas, Luos, and whatever, those categories have done their role. They preserved their groups. They are very good for organizing hunting trips and all those kind of things. But now you have got a new polity called Kenya, which is not necessarily the traditional setup. Even right now, we are talking English, and we're talking it in a Kenyan way. You have Kenyan English. So I don't know what we could call, what we would mean by as Kenyan, because the world has become a global village. And now what needs to be done is, how do we get our space within that global village? Not looking at the past, but looking at the future. How do we position Kenya today as a country that can compete globally? Right now, we are that poor, very, very poor, with a per capita income of 1,900 US dollars. You even wonder how people survive. And then we especially throw in the fact that that money, about 90% of that wealth is held by 10% of the population. So people are extremely poor. So this document for me is a document that tries to put at some place. Even the Western system, there was agitation. When you go back to the Magna Carta, which unlocked a lot of power, a lot of potential in Europe, has informed this constitution. We borrowed heavily from the constitution of Germany in terms of the human rights and things like those. We borrowed a lot from the American Constitution in terms of structure of government. We borrowed a lot from the Constitution of South Africa, a bit from the Indian Constitution. So, and basically, if you read Mazrui, or if you watch this series called Africans are Triple Heritage, we are virtually people of the globe. Kenyans are people of the globe. We have got cultures that are European, cultures that are Indian, cultures that are African, cultures that are Chinese. And so we are sort of a melting pot of all these cultures. And so when you look at that constitution, the way it is done, a good constitution is supposed to be a bit vague. Just as they say that when God gave Moses the 10 Commandments, they were not written in plain text, they were written in calligraphy. So that each generation could have a chance to deal with a curve. You could take up a curve and it means something for you and do whatever. So when a constitution is written in a way that is open to interpretation, to me, it's a good thing. But I think the framers of the constitution, because of what had happened in 2007, and also the South African one, informed by what had happened with apartheid, they went a bit further and became prescriptive in many, many ways. They painted with a small brush instead of painting with a broad brush, making the main outlines, because they were trying to address specific historical injustices that they tried to put there. And so I think that the document we have, for me, when I look at the Bill of Rights, it's sound. When I look at the chapter on elections, it is sound. When I look at the question of public money, is sound. And today I was reading and meditating on chapter 11, Article 11, which nobody's talking about. But it talks about the place of science in developing Kenya, Article 11. It addresses science, culture, intellectual property, all those things. Yeah. So you'll get at a chapter like that, When you go back and look at the budget and ask yourself, how much in the budget is being dedicated to R&D, research and development?
Yeah.
How are we developing science? Then you'll find that we are not doing much of an effort.
Yeah.
When you go to the universities and the lecturer is having notes that he used to teach in the 80s, what are you doing? What are we really doing? We are lost, and a lot of our lecturers are using that. I had right now I'm having a back. I had some surgery on my back, and before I settled down I went around our top neurologists in this country, and everyone was telling me I need to be opened up and screws to be fixed and what have you, and I got scared. Until I ran into this Indian through a friend who introduced me to this Indian doctor who says, no, you can just do a small opening and deal with what is there, and you don't have to put in screw. Now, if our top professors are talking of screws of the 60s, and there's an Indian who is moving around with a briefcase, you can just put your local anesthesia and fixes you. Yeah. That tells you a problem. So I was looking at that chapter 11, and it talks about science and the place of science in the Kenyan economy, Kenyan polity. Then you look at that constitution, is one that was seeing the future. Right now, we should be very, very heavy on AI. Yeah. We should be having a committee. Morocco has set up a whole thing on AI. Many countries, even in Americans, wherever they're talking of AI. Here we are waiting to be consumers. Yeah. And these are things that don't require heavy investments. We have got very well educated kids here in this country. But look at the way they are being even taxed when they try to be creative. You are hammered with taxes. Those kind of things have to go. These kids should be having incubation centers. We should be having research and development centers. Look at the way in Ukraine, it's the young boys who are the small university kids who have come up with very devastating drones. You see. So, you'll find an article like Article 11 will never be mentioned anywhere. Yet it's a very, very important article if we have to look at leadership and understand leadership as just one thing, political leadership, converting natural resources and human resources into wealth. We want to see rich people in Kenya. We want to see rich people. There are just too many poor people in this country that you can't live pretty. In fact, when I got into parliament, the standard request used to be for 500 shillings. You will get somebody. Right now, people are asking for 50 shillings. Saying, niokolee kaunga, niokolee kasukuma angalau ni survive. That kind of poverty is the worst violation of rights. It's not even the prison that they take people in. Not to be able to eat in your own house with your children looking at you and they're crying. That's the worst prison you can put anybody in. And if you have to fight for human rights, we must bring that prison down. The cartels that are distorting the market forces, that are selling fake seeds, fake fertilizers to farmers. And there's a serious issue. Even in my county the other day, I'm prosecuting an issue. We are trying to move people out from growing tobacco to other crops. So there was a funding that came from the World Health Organization given to the county to supply seeds. What do you find? They went and brought seeds. They went just and bought some beans at then or whatever. When you open a packet, weevils start flying out. The cotton is not even branded. It didn't even germinate when we did experiments. And we are talking about 50 million shillings that just have been gone like that. So these kind of people should be put in jail and the keys to be thrown away. That's when we need shock therapy in this country. We need people like Ruto to be put in jail and the keys are thrown away so that whoever becomes president tomorrow will know that, hey, you said the French have just imprisoned their president. You saw that? It needs to happen here like yesterday. Because a lot of problems we have has been impunity by people who exercise political power. They think when you become president, you own the country and your whims are the law, not even your word. So those are the things we need to do.
Unfortunately, the people who you call cartels, sometimes they sit next to you in the Senate. So, but there needs to be
I'll tell you, that is not a correct statement. The Senate a parliament is powerless.
Is it?
All the power of parliament is money. The money is with the president. You have seen when there's a funeral, MPs standing up and telling the president, we need to fix this bridge, we need this, we need this, we need this, and the president grants it, and yet the same MPs passed a budget in parliament which is not being implemented.
So is it then that the MPs don't know that they hold that power, or they just...
No, the power is that the way the Public Finance Management Act was enacted was wrong.
Yeah.
We don't have an independent treasury. What I'm trying to push is that our salvation lies in institutions, not individuals. Let us work to build institutions. And institutions are run by technocrats, not politicians.
Brilliant.
That's why you find no politician signs anywhere except the governor when he's signing law and the president when he's signing law. All other signatures are by technocrats, accountants, lawyers, whatever. But these people have the gun on their head because the institutions are not there to protect them. So what we need to do is to make sure that we put institutions back so that, and even that's why money in parliament is not kept in the MPs, it's kept in an independent treasury. Then the only way parliament now has control over that money is that parliament passes a budget, which is the first requirement for you to access that money. So for the national treasurer to release any coin, he'll first of all say, is it in the budget? If it is there, then you go to the next point. Has the control of budget approved it?
Yeah.
Then you release the money. But today, the money is already with the president. So the president and the politicians have promised when they're campaigning, some even promise that I will cut a piece of the moon and hang in your villages so that at night you don't need lighting. You see, they have made very big promises. Then they come here and they realize that the only way you can get a bridge done in your area is to bow before the president. So they're totally powerless because the president already has the money. And that's why if we have to change this country on day one, at the point of being sworn in, an executive order should be issued separating the treasury from the presidency.
But Senator, let me challenge you a bit, because even if we do that, even if we do build the strongest institutions, even if we do separate the presidency from the treasury, we still exist within a neoliberal world order. We still exist on the periphery of global capital. So that means that there are ways in which we may not have control over, the constitution is going to be implemented within a certain power context, and Kenya exists within a certain global power context. So, for example, implementing Article 43 of the Constitution would require overriding a lot of neoliberal principles.
No, I don't not necessarily. I don't believe that. All these potholes you see on our roads, the Americans have not dropped bombs on those roads. Has an American bombed any of our roads? Or the British? And they are all with the craters. It's all with the craters. Why? It is the professional not being able to do his work the way he's supposed to do. And that is what we must deal with. And when you look at our budget, allocation to R&D, research and development, is a measly 0.02%, when it is supposed to be a minimum of 2%. What are you dealing with? Look at even what is happening with health right now. Health, we have signed the Abuja Protocol, which says we must commit at least 15% to health of the budget. We are giving a very small percentage to it. And then we are running health on private hospitals, which will do the natural thing is to loot that fund. Instead of putting up public hospitals, properly paid medical personnel, running those hospitals.
But the IMF will tell you, no, we do not want you.
Your IMF can only come in when you are mismanaging your economy. When you are going to beg, that's when IMF says we shall deal with you. There's no IMF in Botswana. Why? We don't need IMF. Only comes in when you have mismanaged your economy and you are begging. Then they say, okay, we are going to make sure that you do ABCD. But if you just come down and manage this economy well, right now, They are telling us they want to sell Kenya Pipeline Corporation to be able to support the budget. Then you ask yourself, why can't you have a balanced budget? You have made a budget of 4.7 trillion. Your taxation, ideally your budget should be funded by taxes. If KRA was to hit their targets 100%, they will only raise 2.3 trillion. Where is the 2.4 trillion going to come from? Then you tell us you want to sell national assets. You want to, basically just stealing them. You want to sell national assets to do what? To finance a budget that is unreasonable. So why can't we just have a balanced budget and begin reorganizing the country, lower taxation, allow the economy to thrive, let the local enterprises, a teacher earning and having disposable income, will go to the local marketplace and order a welder to make a window, you are creating wealth. So why don't we just allow that? Kenya Pipeline, instead of trying to steal it, why don't we say this is our birthright? We want to control the hydrocarbon industry in East and Central Africa. We want to see how this East Pipeline can get to Goma so that we are Kenyans pumping oil into Goma. Then we do what? We ask for whale leaves in Uganda, whale leaves in Rwanda, and so forth. Banking in this area. Remember, Kenya does not export any minerals of worth value. We export tea leaves, which account for very little. What has built this country is human resource. We have a service industry. And we must know that. And we must continue investing in our schools, not doing what is happening today. We must continue investing in our schools. We must have our lecturers and professors challenged to be having new notes every year, not to use notes that they used for 10 years ago to still give lectures, outdated information. So once we do that, we will create a dominant Kenyan economy in this region, and Kenyans will be rich. And look at what we call Kenya. What we call Kenya is the Uganda Railway. Why the railway passed from Mombasa to Nairobi, to Nakuru, to Kisumu, to Eldoret, to Malaba, and it branched to Nyeri and these other sides, that is the Kenyan economy, a service economy. There's nothing this country has beyond service. So we must make sure that we understand our economy, and that's why I think President Kibaki understood it, and he had talked of doing the lapset. But when Tom and Jerry came in, what they did,
I think it deserves a round of applause for that, sir.
What Tom and Jerry did, they decided to build another railway, running alongside another railway this way. Not understanding that what Quebec wanted by creating the lapset, he was creating a totally new economy that could double the economy of Kenya within a generation. You see? So these are the kind of things that we have to think now. How do we make Kenyans rich? There's no other way. We can talk of neoliberalism, we can talk of whatever, but as long as you are hungry, there's no difference between a hungry neoliberal and a hungry Republican and a hungry conservative. That only comes up when you have a full stomach. So let us give Kenyans a full stomach. And I'm Catholic, and in 1967, Pope Paul VI, in one of his catechism, said, the new name of peace is development. You want people to be peaceful, develop them, make them rich. So the new name of peace is development. If you look at the areas that have a lot of civil strife, it's poverty. And I even look at what poverty is doing in our cities. A lot of crime is going on because of poverty. So we must work to make people rich. Even when you look at the parable of the Good Samaritan, that guy was a rich guy. He could pick up this guy, he could take him to a hospital, he could pay the bills. Jesus never gave an example of any poor man doing anything.
Senator, we're running out of time.
So we need rich people here.
All people in this room deserve to be rich. That said, Senator, we're running out of time. You should see mics close to you at a few minutes after he answers this final question. But one of the biggest criticisms for your candidature is, again, you standing behind this constitution that many people might consider exclusionary in some of its aspects. And by this, I mean some of the groups being disenfranchised or outrightly banned or outlawed simply for existing. How do you reconcile your candidature with the right to exist for so many people and the so many rights that exist within the constitution that they don't experience, or even economic crime, because the constitution exists, but then a lot of people exist in the fringes. And as you said, 90% of Kenyans do not control the wealth in the country. But then this is beyond the economy. I'm speaking about the existence of so many groups within the country, and you're very, very loud advocating of this constitution.
I don't know which groups these are. Maybe if you could mention them by name. You're fearing to mention them.
It's not fair. It's the groups that the penal code excludes. People that
if they don't have a name, they don't exist.
That is not a fair assessment, Senator. It's not a fair assessment. I'm speaking about specifically to point out, to hit the nail on the head, a lot of gay people who exist in this country that the constitution outrightly bans their existence and throws it out of the window.
Yes, that question, I told you that the constitution was a ceasefire document.
How do you then solve
it? Was a ceasefire document. It cannot be solved. That's a political question. It's not a legal question.
Yeah.
When you go into office, you hold the constitution up and swear to protect and defend the constitution. But the constitution protects everybody's right to exist. I don't think that the constitution has got anywhere. It even criminals, the constitution protects them. Those who have been arrested for crimes have got rights. Everybody has got a right. So what happens is that the question of LGBTQ+, is it a correct thing? I've never been able to understand it. That question is a question that is a political question. Anybody who has got an agenda for it can mobilize politically.
Yeah.
And when you get the political whereby you have got a majoritarian voice and the people accept it, it will go. But for now, when it came up during the review process, it was removed. And if you look at even the definition of marriage in the Constitution of Kenya, is a marriage of opposite sexes. So if you want to get that thing done, you have got Article 255, 256, and 257, which allow you to change the Constitution. It's not for a president to deal with that. It is for those groups to come and agitate and mobilize. And if they get political clout, they will get their way in. The Constitution of Kenya can even allow you to secede, as long as you convince the others and bring about that issue. You see, the problem you had with mentioning the issue, and I was pushing you to mention it, the problem you had with mentioning the issue is that it's an issue that is political and needs political clout. And without political clout, it's not the business of the president to go against the constitution of the country.
But let me push back a little bit. As long as the penal code exists criminalizing activities between people of the same gender who want to love one another, then that means that de facto the political organizing can be criminalized, or the penal code can be used to target people who are politically organizing in that respect. The question does not come up, will you change the constitution? The question comes up, how will you ensure that even those who today can be targeted using the penal code as they politically organize for their own recognition are going to be protected?
I don't think that's how it's going to happen. I think the bigger problem you have is not the penal code. The bigger problem you have is the philosophical mindset in Africa. You must distinguish between the morality of being that was articulated by the Aristotelian school and the morality of conduct that is articulated by the African traditional religions, which believe that the way you behave in a village can make that village not have rain. And the Aristotelian system is that however wicked a society is, you alone can save yourself. So the morality of conduct is the biggest barrier you have to deal with in terms of gay rights in Africa. It's not the constitution. is the morality, the African traditional religion that you have to deal with, not the law.
I
The-
think,
the
I
mo-
think
just a
that can be
minute.
debated, but I think we need to go to the audience now.
So the Africa, I'll just finish. The morality of being, where it says that you can be holy as an island and go to heaven alone and leave others, is not there.
Yeah.
My grandmother will tell you that the purpose of morality is to create the conditions necessary for the transmission of life. If you can achieve that, then you can proceed to become an ancestor. If you have got a situation whereby you cannot transmit life, you are called a witch. And a witch is killed.
Strong words
Oh,
there. Strong
No,
words there.
Senator.
that's a question of it's a philosophical condition. I'm not saying that anything.
Yeah.
That is what is, and that is what you have to fight.
Yeah.
So you have to be able to make people appreciate the Aristotelian construct of a morality of being me and my God, not a morality of conduct of me, I am because you are, Ubuntu. You see? And you are the people who keep on shouting Ubuntu. And Ubuntu has got that. That you care about how this guy, it might cause the rain not to fall in my village because he's doing something bad.
All right.
He's stealing somebody's bananas.
Yeah, I think it's time we have the rope
So-
mic going. Sir.
So it is not a legal problem.
Mm.
And I'm telling you, even if you pass it as a law, they can come and burn the whole parliament down because of that. So we must get people to understand the philosophical anchoring that a society has.
Yeah.
Do you think then this constitution addresses the issues of the common mwananchi? Of course, you've mentioned that these were also Kenyans, but don't you see the difference between those rich Kamba, rich Kikuyus who are now making a constitution for that poor Kikuyu? Because you can also see some things in the constitution, example, the right to bail. It is, it is there, but it is only available to them. That is why they even have anticipatory cash bail, bail that you can't even arrest them. They already have bail. When even us, the other day, we were being charged for terrorism and cash bail, 200 or 300,000. The other thing, Senator, I've realized, you've talked so much about, an independent treasury, but importantly, you've not at least addressed the question of the disparity of, how wealth is distributed in the country. So that now tomorrow there are some people who, their father stole from the country. They have a lot of money. And remember, we are living in a democracy of money, where if you don't have money, you cannot be, most likely a leader. And therefore, don't you think that if we don't address at least the wealth question, the distribution of land in the country, and also how at least people are treated by those, the factory owners and all these other people and the international interest in the country, then we'll still have an independent treasury, but also someone who is sitting in that table who has generational wealth that was stolen from the Kenyans. Lastly, Comrade Senator, it's the question of at least interpretation of the Constitution, because you realize that Article 259, if I'm not wrong, talks about the principles, of the interpretation of the Constitution. But again, if this Constitution is, a middle class, led project, and you've seen even the problems we've had in terms of the interpretation of the Constitution. Example on the question of, 2/3 gender rule, that
There's
just
no
a minute.
2/3 gender rule in the Constitution.
No, I'm
There's a
saying
2/3 gender principle.
We
Get
have a
that
question.
right.
Okay. Okay, Senator, let me just land my point. So at least we have the Constitution talks about equality, yeah? And then we envision that at least we are going to have 2/3 gender principle. But at least with in one at the advisory of from the highest court, which is the Supreme Court, even the judges could not agree about at least how this is supposed to be achieved, because some thought that this is the Constitution, according, if you follow the Constitution, then you are supposed to implement this immediately. And some talked about, progressive, implementing it, progressively. Then do you think then the Constitution has at least a theory of interpreting the laws? And if it does then, and if you, is it also then interpreted within, the interest of the those who are sitting in the judiciary and the politicians, who also don't represent us because they are members of a very different class from, majority of us?
Let me begin from somewhere. when President Moi said, kwani katiba itamwongezea sufuria ya chakula ya ugali, Professor Okoth Ogendo answered, said, no. Katiba itakuzuia kuninyang'anya ile ugali yangu kidogo. So first of all, let us not make it look like being poor is a good thing. That mindset in social society, civil society, that the middle class is something you should not aspire to become is wrong. We want the middle class to be the largest group in this country, not the poor people. Number two is when you come to the interpretation of the Constitution, gives people rights. One of the things when you get a provision like every child is entitled to free basic education, what is that supposed to achieve? It has not been implemented. What is it supposed to achieve? When people are entitled to universal health care, what is that supposed to achieve? It is designed for the people who cannot pay school fees, for people who cannot pay private hospitals, to go to that. So the duty bearer is the state. And that's why when you get an independent treasury, it will ensure that the money is set aside to provide those things, those amenities that are there, so that you can pull yourself out of poverty. Yesterday, there was a guy who was in my office. He's a multi-millionaire. I think he's almost a billionaire now. He's just in his 40s. And he told me, we were discussing, and he said how he grew up. He was a single mother. They never had enough food. Then a Catholic nun picked him and began sponsoring him through school. He went on. He finished, he began business. Today he's a very wealthy man. He did not wait for redistribution. And I don't believe in redistribution. I don't believe in redistribution. I believe in the production of wealth. There's nothing to redistribute. Today, if you begin redistributing, I don't believe. I believe in creation of wealth. I believe in creation of wealth. In historical injustices, I learned other thing. It will not put more food, it will not expand the economy of Kenya.
Land reform.
It will not expand. In fact, we should get people off land. We should build industry, we should industrialize. Go to Europe. We need factory jobs. That's why today, somebody will sell, right now they're recruiting policemen. Parents are selling land to go and buy a job for their children as a policeman and military men. I'm telling you, we must reframe, we must decolonize our minds. We must build factories. We must build factories, I'm telling you. The question of land, if you guys here, if you are given land to go and toil on that land, you're not going to go. But if we build a factory here, and there are factory jobs, you are going to take up those jobs. Right? Agriculture in any serious country, agriculture is for production of food, not for sustenance, not for being a backbone of the economy. What we need to do, if people stall, we punish them, we do what we can do, but that is not the salvation of this country. The salvation of this country is in how do we create new wealth. Remember, you are reproducing and God is not making more land. So how can you be looking at land, something that is not expanding, when the population is expanding? We must urbanize, we must industrialize, we must embrace the service economy. And I told you that today, what we call Kenya's economy is the Uganda Railway. It's not all that vast land. Why is the land such a big land in Turkana? Not an issue. There's so much land.
Senator, allow me to push you on that point for the sake of the audience.
The issue for me, we must move away from redistribution and begin embracing production. We must produce. We are not producing.
Allow me just to push on that before we go back to the audience. I lived in New York City, and in the country of the United States is one of the wealthiest. It is the wealthiest country. It has a productive sector. It has a financial sector, and yet it is the city with the biggest number of homeless people that I have ever lived in. So I think the question of redistribution, I don't think can just be elided by
No, I'm not
production.
gliding. Go to Denmark.
I lived there too.
Yeah. Is it the same as New York? Is it the same as New York?
No, but they have much stronger laws around redistribution.
Yes, they do. And how do they distribute? Through taxation.
Yes.
And how do the taxes come? Through employment.
Yes.
They don't redistribute land. They've created a mechanism of creating wealth and redistributing that. So, and if you remember after the World War, what model of development did Europe get that was different from the Americans? Because the Americans rejected that model because they said it was going to benefit black people. That's why America is in the mess it is. It rejected universal health care. Look at the healthcare in America now. It's a total mess. The poor people have nothing. Because they were trying to deal with it, to keep the black people under lock and key, they rejected programs that could build the people up. And now they forgot that even poor people can be, even white people can become poor. So that's why you have got that problem there. You go to largely in Europe, you find that even the UK, the medical system, at least the basic healthcare is provided. All these things are given there. So there were reports about how to reconstruct the world after the Second World War, which America rejected, which Europe embraced, and Europe has moved on. And what we are trying to do here, and if you heard me say that the civic republican structure of our constitution provides for the common good, and I've given an example of the common good: education that is compulsory and taxpayer funded for all children. You see, that's a game changer. It's there. The right to access quality health care, which means the state, when the treasury is controlled well, there's money, that money is going to hospitals. We revive the public hospitals. We put in equipment, we put in personnel. You fall sick, you walk into a hospital, you are treated. That's a game changer. Today, people are being bankrupted by school fees, being bankrupted by education, being bankrupted by health. And so if you take care of that, and you get an efficient transport system, we'll have gotten care of a lot of things, but we must begin thinking of a day when we'll say, I have got land, I'm disposing of that land, I cannot work it. And even today, I even run a farm myself. I have a big farm I run. But I cannot break even if I was to pay a living wage to those workers. You go to the farms, the payments are very, 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 very poor. So we must understand that agriculture cannot be the backbone of any economy. Peasant farming cannot. Let us work towards having agriculture to give us food sovereignty. Let us subsidize our farmers. Even right now, why are they subsidizing farmers? The government is giving out subsidized fertilizer, subsidized seeds. Why?
Yeah.
It cannot pay. If you have ever worked land, it's very difficult to break even on land. And peasant farming cannot drive this economy forward.
Senator,
We must look for industry.
Senator, I think the crowd is eager to chime in, so we can get two more questions. One from that side. I think one from the right, please.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Senator. Hi, Mamka. Senator, I find myself disagreeing with you on some of the positions. For example, I do not think that we can dismiss historical injustices in building a new Kenya. 6 million acres are still under the British in Kenya today. 2% of Kenyans still own the whole country. So redistribution of land is inevitable for us to have Article 43 implemented. For us people, Article 43 is the only article that speaks truly to our lived realities and to our issues. So we cannot implement Article 43. For example, look at the people living in Mathare, in Kibra. Look at the land in Laikipia, in Nanyuki. How do we not redistribute that land? How do we dismiss it as not being important to our economic prosperity as the people of Kenya? Secondly, I do not think that the Constitution is supposed to be a vague document. And I do not think that it is the ultimate solution to our problems. At the movement, we call it a tactical stopover because we are headed to an absolute liberation and delinking from these neoliberal forces that hold us to date. We know that the economy of Kenya is not independent of IMF and World Bank. Look at what happened in 2024. They imposed a bill on us that Parliament had to pass, even if the whole country said no. But why were they passing this bill? Because they still have neoliberal forces holding them. So we cannot dismiss that Kenya is a neoliberal state, that Kenya is a neocolonial state, that still we have masters overseas who decide the fate of the Kenyan people today. And it is extremely important to us that our leaders are aware of these facts, cognizant, and do not dismiss that we are living in a neoliberal country. And to liberate ourselves, we have to take the steps needed, especially decolonize. In decolonizing, it's not just our minds, it's also our land. It pains me that today we're still squeezing in Mathare in Kibera. Well, there's acres, millions of acres of land still owned by the British. It is wrong. 63 years after independence, and it is just idle land. If you take a drive towards that side, maybe, Senator, you haven't gone to that side. One Saturday, go and just look at the massive land that's laying bare. And look at the people living in the slums when we could have this land. So we cannot say that we will not have redistribution of land. We will not focus on historical injustices. Remember all the reports that have been churned out, the TGRC report. We cannot dismiss it. It's a document that highlights what needs to be done.
May I respond? It was supposed to be a question.
But Senator,
Not a lecture.
we need to also have some time to finish what we are saying to you, because a lot of young people here are very interested in this conversation. Okay, let me let you, because you're my...
Okay, let me tell you that I represent Busia. I represent Busia, where people have a lot of land. I know people who have left 20 acres in Busia and are watchmen in Nairobi here and are living in Mathare. I know that. So let us not come up with concepts that are not scientific. I know people who are here. I'm telling you, land is not... The other thing, when I go back to the question of the finance bill, let me tell you, the finance bill never used to be debated in this country. If you remember the days when, at budget time, goods could disappear from the shelves, and then what happened? After the budget after the finance bill is read, they came back with new prices. I am the one who went to court in 2018 and challenged that fact, and the court declared that the finance bill must be debated. That's how it came up. And when it came up, today you saw what happened when people began understanding what is happening. The Constitution required it that the finance, all bills must be debated. So let us look at what supports us. And I'm telling you, even if we take that land and cut it into parcels, and we don't industrialize this country, 3 generations down the line, the entire country will be one slum. How many people are living in London today? And what's the size of London? How many people are living in Nairobi today? What's the size of Nairobi? Let us urbanize this country. Let us industrialize this country. I'm telling you, right now I've done an audit. I've done an audit in my county, a fraud audit, not even a forensic audit, a fraud audit. And it established that in the 2022-2023 budget, 5.2 billion shillings was stolen out of a budget of 8.6. Where is the British there? Where is neocolonialism in that? Where are the Americans there? Let us deal with the devils we are.
Let's take a few more questions.
We are the problem, and we must govern this country with a balance sheet, profit and loss balance sheet.
Let's get to the question. Let's get to another question.
Let me finalize as I give.
Okay, briefly.
Okay, sawa. Let me give time, but I'll find you.
Sawa.
Oh, okay.
One-
Okay. Everyone is so eager to chime in. I love this. Okay.
Good evening. Good evening. My question is, Senator, you talked about converting natural resources into wealth, and you also talked about richness and development. So these are all abstract terms. I'd like a concrete perspective on what wealth and richness or development looks like for you.
First of all, we must realize the concept of a developmental state. If you have heard of it, a developmental state whereby taxes are pulled together. And we had that model. We had that model at independence. That's the model that the Asian tigers have used, whereby you pull resources because individually you are too poor to do anything of meaningful. So you pull resources together, you invest in an industry or in a sector, and you give the management of that particular product to the best people you have. So our parastatals today have failed to a concept of the developmental state, whereby you pulled resources and invested in this sector, in a parastatal in this sector, in that sector, because the local people did not have the capacity to invest in that sector and create wealth. But the mistake we made right from Jomo Kenyatta is that we began giving the management of these parastatals to cronies. Today, go to any board of a county parastatal. You'll find that the people who are there are people who ran in the elections and maybe failed, and they ran in the president's party, or they are relatives of the president, or friends of the president, and other powerful people. And those people have got no capacity to run those institutions. So one of the first things I'll have to do here is that, and I've gone to court, I've litigated in the High Court, I've litigated in the Court of Appeal, and gotten orders that parastatal boards must be competitively filled. But the people in power have rejected that. And so one of the biggest hurdles we have is with the management of the economy. So I want to get the right people managing the economy. You want to sit on the board of Kenya Airways, my friend. You'll do an interview and convince a panel of experts on how you, in your 3 years, you are going to move Kenya Airways from point A to point B. Not move it from point B to point A. So that will be one of the key factors will be that. Number two, we'll have to distinguish between ownership and management. My own experience growing up in Western Kenya, when Mumias Sugar was Mumias Sugar. Mumias Sugar was owned by the Kenyan state, but it was managed by a British company called Booker Tet. And Mumias Sugar was thriving. Then they said they want to privatize, and they grabbed that thing in our local version of the oligarchs. They grabbed that asset, and they just looted it to the ground. So we're also going to look at the question of management seriously. Like I've just spoken about Kenya Pipeline. I gave an example that Kenya Pipeline as an industry, for me, if I was president, I would be thinking of how do I get Kenya Pipeline into Goma so that Kenyans can dominate the hydrocarbon in market, distributing of hydrocarbons. That way, and not what they are trying to do now, to sell it to themselves.
We're almost an hour and a half in, Senator. I think we need one more.
So for me, my idea of development will be that we need to quantify and count, like the Chinese have done, how many people at the end of the year have you taken out of poverty? What are the comparative advantages of the various regions we have? If we have got minerals, what are the mineral maps do we have? How do we extract those minerals to benefit the common good? But ultimately, the market will not be the one controlling the country it's controlling today. Political action will control the country. Market determinism, I don't believe in it. Today, look at our banks. They are Shylocks. The money in the bank belongs to Kenyans, but to borrow that money, you can hardly borrow that money and grow wealth in this country. We must address the question of interest rates. We must get interest rates that can allow you to borrow and invest and grow your economy.
Great. Brilliant, Senator. Can we get 2 more questions? We're kind today, so yeah, she has the mic here. Go ahead, please.
My name is Dora. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
My name is Dora, and I'm a novelist. And I am loving the idea of having an independent treasury and having the subject of separation of powers clearly outlined in the Constitution. However, I do have a question on the subject of the leadership models that we have in our continent. I do feel that most of the models of leadership adopted, especially even in the country, they're relics of the colonial era. They're templates of leadership that were copied and pasted without due regards to whether they had been effective in their owner countries or whether they would be effective in our country. We have spoken of the excellence of institutions as being the salvation that we have, meaning that policies preserve results for decades. We might be gone, but policies are there to outlive us. Policies ensure that everything is within that framework. So another thing is that community good leadership with public service. So most of the time, what I am observing around is the Tom and Jerry's that we spoke about, the people who come to power without having. Without having political goodwill inside of them. How do we put systems in force that ensure that we have leaders who preserve goodwill? We have a campaign-oriented leadership model. We have a political parties system where the political parties that are there, most of them don't represent the will or the wishes of the people. Most of these political parties are elitist in nature, and they have been most leaders have used them, leveraged them to divide our country on tribal lines. And therefore, my proposition is a nominative system where people do not have to use most of their money to convince Kenyans, do not have to put their pictures on billboards. Sorry, my name is. So they don't have to put their pictures on billboards and tell you that I am the one, please elect me. But we should at least get away from that. So I want to know, what do you think about the electoral process, and how then do we get to a place where we have leaders who truly represent us, leaders who have goodwill? Yeah.
As on my part, I think we must design state house or power in such a way that we design it for a devil being in power and not being able to affect us. Let us stop looking for good people. Let us design our country in such a way that even if the devil took over power today, you can still go to bed and sleep. Good people don't need laws. It's bad people who need laws to control them. So for me, what I think is that the question of nomination, who will be nominating, is actually another question, you see. I think for me, just that elections, let us go to the way the Constitution requires us to do elections. Let us have the digital elections that are tamper-proof, that are verifiable, that are simple. And I'm not talking about the internet voting. Brazil, they don't do internet voting. That Kim's Kit is a complete voting tool. It can register voters. It can then give you to vote. But what happens in Kenya is that we go and disable voting and vote counting. So they are done manually. So if we just did these things well, you'll find that the theft of elections will not be there. And when you lock away money from the treasury, you lock that money away. Like when they were impeaching Rigiji, the powers that be were dangling 10 million shillings. There were 11 counts. You are only to vote on one and you get 10 million shillings. So some of us, like me, who voted no on all the 11, walked away without the 10 million shillings. But that 10 million shillings came from somewhere. It came from your taxes. Right now, I've got a question on the floor of the Senate. There's something, you are complaining here, but you people don't read. There's something, and I will say that in bold, you don't read. There's something called, because you have chosen to complain and not to organize, there's something called the monthly statement of actual revenue and net expenditure issues produced by the Treasury every month. When I was going through in January, when I was looking at it as I do it I go through every month, I noticed something terrible. The salary of judges, the salaries and allowances of judges and the president and all those people who are paid directly from the consolidated fund, the budget was 4.2 billion. When you divide it over 12 months, it came to 301 million per month in salaries. And they were begging that they paid that money until that 1st of December, from 1st of July 2024, that 1st of December 2024. In January 2025, they paid that amount, an extra 19.6 billion was padded in, taken out. In February, they went back and paid the 3.1 million. So my question is, where did this 20 billion go? Who picked this 20 billion from the Treasury using the allowance for paying judges and other constitutional office holders? So these are the kind of things that are destroying this country. When my own county loses 5.2 billion out of a budget of 8.6 billion, what do you think has happened in Busia? What kind of what's the poverty position? Go and look at ECD classrooms. There's no ECD classroom. Now, without ECD classroom, how are you going to get an A in Form 4 if the foundation is so bad? So let us look at this culture of stealing from the public. It's not the IMF that is telling people to go and steal. The IMF comes in because we are stealing. If we stop stealing, we will not do that. Also go to Germany. Look at how Germany recovered after the Second World War. Germany did not take this thing of loans or whatever. It was the enterprise of the people that recovered the German economy. It's not the Americans, as people try to say. So we must also realize that as a people, we need to rebuild this country. We need to make it a serious offense to steal from the public. I don't believe in the death penalty, but a life imprisonment for some of these things. We need to do those serious interventions to make sure that public resources are respected. What is destroying this country is mismanagement. When we are losing so much money, you talked of 12 trillion in debt. My own computation is that we have overpaid our debt by 3 trillion shillings. If you look at the figures of the debt that was legitimately borrowed, you look at the withdrawals from the central bank, you look at the statements from the Treasury, you find that in reality, we have overpaid our debt by 3 trillion shillings. But the books still say we owe 12 trillion shillings. That is where the rain beats us. And that's why we must take public finances seriously, get it under control, and then begin recovering. And this country, I'm telling you, this money that is confusing politics, that people keep on handing away, is money that is stolen from the Treasury. Right now, they're calling it what? Empowerment. They're running around with money saying they're bringing empowerment. They can't pay doctors. Doctors are marching on the street. Lecturers are striking, but are carrying billions of shillings and distributing, trying to buy votes, because they can just go to the Treasury and pick the money and do what they want. So let us lock up our money, and we shall have drained the swamp, and Kenya will sober up.
Great. Thank you so much. One final one, and please keep it short. We are short of time.
So my name is Geoffrey Mboya. So with all due respect, this is a build-up from Wanjiru's. So as senator, when you conduct your fraud audit in Busia, that is only a reflection of Busia. So the land question she talked about in Laikipia is a major thing for Laikipia people. The question of also the land question as well, for say Kericho people, you need to know, and I'm sure you know, about
I'm in court over the Kericho land issue.
what Lipton's and the tea estate have done to Kericho families. So I think as a leader who's running for presidency, you need to widen your spectrum across the country. You need to look at every issues, especially that handles land question for various people in their respective counties. So, anyways, that was not my question or my argument. So you talked about um, the technical chapters, and that is the public finance, and also you talked about for IBC. But majority of Kenyans have not really read through the constitution properly, and so there is a lot of gaps that lies within how the constitutional reforms mechanisms are actually being undertaken. For example, last year when the Senate and also the Parliament was impeaching the deputy president, the then deputy president, we saw how swiftly that process went, how swiftly leaders moved in and Gachagua was impeached. So how do we empower common mwananchi to be able to understand better ways they can be able to support constitutional reforms in this country? Thank you.
So you've talked about how the reason that minorities, so sexual minorities and gender minorities in Kenya are excluded is because of particular African philosophies. You talked about the ancestors and etc. and then also then not being able to reproduce. But the other reason that gender minorities and sexual minorities are seriously excluded in Kenya is because of imperialism. We've seen right-wing imperialists in Africa, across Africa, whether you go to Malawi, Ethiopia, Kenya, we've seen them take a consolidated strategy in terms of pushing policy, pushing bills, shaping education, healthcare policy such that we don't have sexuality education in this country, such that key reproductive health rights are denied from women in this country, such that even to identify and organize as a queer person in this country is criminalized. And one of the key organizations that has been at the forefront of this strategy, especially in Kenya, is the Kenyan Christian Professionals Forum. And so I'm asking this question on behalf of a lot of people in this room, especially young people who are really concerned about social rights in this country. But it has been rumored that you've been part of the KCPF forum. So for me, it's a question of how can we trust you with our social rights in this country if you've been part of this organization that has literally criminalized and been at the forefront of criminalization of key social rights in this country. Are you still part of that organization? And if you can clarify whether you still hold those beliefs and what you would do in order to ensure that people are protected in this country. Yeah.
I'll begin there because did you do your research well? No, I'm asking because you are claiming I'm a member of what kind of organization?
She asked.
I am not a member. I even don't know what that is. I'm not a member. I'm a Catholic. In religious matters, I'm just a Catholic. I don't belong to that, whatever you are calling it. I'm a Catholic. I believe in the social Catholic of the doctrine, the social doctrine of the Catholic Church, which believes in developing the whole human being, which believes in running proper schools, in running proper medicine, in having people live in a modern society. I am that. But I am not a member of any professional body that organizes Christians outside the church structure. I listen to my Pope, and that is it. So, if there's anything like that, I'm not a member of it. But the question is this. My concern right now as a leader is to see that the law as we have it is implemented. The common good is upheld. Whether you worship a god, you worship a statue, you worship whatever, is not important to me. That's a matter of your private sphere. In the public sphere, we have to have what we call secularism. We have to have that neutrality and the freedom to have your world views. But ultimately, when as a political leader, my concern is to see that the economy of this country is an economy that carries people to prosperity. And right now, that cannot happen because the leadership is busy stealing, and even the little money that the taxes we have put together are not getting down to the people. Regarding the question of land, my argument is not that the land, that the historical injustices are not issues to be addressed, but they are not the silver bullet. The idea of framing the land question as the silver bullet is what I reject. The silver bullet for this country, like any other country, we must have efficient banking. We must have proper people driving enterprise. We must begin creating wealth in the modern way. Even if we took the estate of Jomo Kenyatta today, the estate of Arap Moi today, the estate of all these people today, and subdivided it and do whatever we did, it's not going to resolve the problems of this country. The youth bulge is so huge. There are so many PhDs who are in the houses. There are so many engineers doing nothing. We are not going to get an engineer to go and begin running a farm, tilling soil. We have to absorb people that we have trained, who have invested. Doctors, like my sister here, he's a medical doctor doing interviews here. So we need to get her. We need to give her a salary that can get her to go and treat patients. Somebody could be dying because she's interviewing me.
We still need her to do the interviews. So, she can do both.
What I'm trying to say,
Senator, we've run out of time, unfortunately.
What I'm trying to say is this, that honestly, let us get into a system of creating new wealth as the ultimate goal. If there's anything that happened in the past, we fix it, not as the solution to our problems, but as addressing a mistake that happened in the past. But the future, we must dream of a future that is different from the past we come from.
That's a great way to end it, Senator. Ma'am, okay. We have one more question? Briefly, please.
I am Mzee here. And other agencies.
It's only right.
I'm
We let
the
you
only
ask
Mzee
the question. Okay.
Kwa sababu ya masaa, because of time. Kwa jina naitwa Edward Peter Nyerere, my name. A Kenyan citizen. Ile kitu nilikuwa nataka kuambia my brother there. Wakati wa mkoloni tulipigania uhuru tupate usawa katika nchi hii, haki yetu katika Kenya. Tusiwe colonized. But wakati huo kulikuwa na senators katika parliament ya mzungu, kulikuwa na governors katika hiyo parliament ya mzungu. Na hii constitution hii tumetoka ndani haikuwa na senator na haikuwa na governor. Nyinyi mmekuja kuirudisha katika hii constitution mpya. But kama ingekuwa ni uwezo wangu, ukweli ni kwamba this constitution tulisukumiwa na nguvu. Wakati tulikuwa nasema kwamba hatujatosheka kwa ile mambo na constitution, wale matajiri na corrupt people in the government walisema kwamba hiyo mambo tutakuja kutekeleza baadaye. Wacha tupitishe saa hii, after baadaye tutakuja kutekeleza hiyo mambo mnalalamikia. In really sense, kama ingekuwa uwezo wangu, a governor hangekuwa CEO wa county. Kwa sababu hao ndio wameleta corruption, na katika kazi wanaongea siasa, mpaka imefika saa hii wafanyakazi katika counties wanaongea politics in the office. Hawazungumzi mambo ya kazi. Ile creativity ya wafanyakazi walikuwa wanazungumza creativity ya Quran, the institution, hawazungumzi mambo ya kazi. Saa hii kazini kuna politics kwa sababu the CEO of the county is a politician. Inatakana a technocrat awe CEO wa county. So kama kuna mpangilio ya kuzungumzia mambo ya constitution ama kuchange constitution, that one should be agenda on its own. Kwa sababu yenyewe governors ndio wameleta corruption katika counties. Sasa kila pahali imezungumziwa ni kila county, yani corruption imekuwa kila pahali Kenya sasa hivi. Sasa kama corruption imetolewa kwa serikali, imepewa governors kuja kurun katika county, mtasemaje mnapigana na corruption na governors wenyewe ndio corrupt? Kwa sababu ukienda kuangalia katika payroll, ya counties, not only Nairobi, counties zote. Ukisikia governor akisema kwamba kuna corruption katika nini wafanyakazi ni wengi ama kuna ghost workers, that governor anajua nini anafanya. Kwa sababu kuna wafanyakazi wengine wanaweza kupeleka areas za counties. Kuna wafanyakazi wamejitolea kufanya kazi katika counties na yuko katika office za counties na hawalipi mishahara na counties.
Yeah.
Lakini yuko katika namba ile ofisi katika structure. Yeah. Na wakati mnakuja kusema, wakati wanakuja kuonekana wanagundulikana kwa sababu kuna pesa wanakula, akisema hesabu ya wafanyakazi ni hii, I have evidence, ni hii, wanakuja kusema kwamba tio kuna corruption. Wanaweza kusema eti kuna corruption, anataka kuhesabu wafanyakazi. Ukisikia governor mwenyewe anasema anataka kuhesabu wafanyakazi, kuna pesa amekula za haramu anataka kuhepa kwa public isijulikane.
Okay. Asante sana.
Issue ya CDF. Katika constitutions dani kama kuna CDF inazungumzia mambo ya CDF direct. Mambo ya CDF, wanasiasa, MPs na MCA na governors. Unakuta governor ana school fees yake analipia mtu fulani. MP analipia mtu fulani school fees. Na MCA analipia mtu fulani. Na unakuta governor analipia mtu fulani katika ile ward. Na MP pia analipia mtu fulani katika ile ward. Na MCA analipia mtu fulani katika ile ward. Mambo ya education, kulipia watu wa school fees, ni constitution itafutiwe njia iwe amended. School fees iende kwa mfuko moja Kenya yote, school fees iwe free kwa kila mwanafunzi.
Yes.
Mambo ya huyu kuwa governor, kwa sababu governors na MPA na MCA na ndio wanapinga kabisa mambo ya CDF. Hataki CDF iwe amended, mfuko iende moja, pesa iende pale pamoja, free education iwe Kenya across the board.
Thank you.
Hello, ilikuwa tu, I want to answer one question. Hello. Kuna ile nini umesema kwamba governor asisimamie, asiwe nini. Hiyo kitu ya shida ya governor ni kwamba governor amesimamia pesa. Na hiyo ndio maana tunasema pesa lazima isimamiwe na technocrat kwa county na kwa national government. Tuwe na independent treasury kwa county na independent treasury kwa national government, na governor hata kuwa na nafasi ya kuharibu pesa.
Asante sana. I think that is a wonderful place to end. I mean, I think this is the most engaged audience we have ever had. So it is really encouraging to see the level of engagement we have had today. I would like to start by thanking the audience for being here on a Friday evening. I know there are many interesting places you could have been otherwise. I would like to thank Africa Uncensored and Tom Mukwana for being such an amazing co-host today. I would like to thank, yes, indeed. And I would like to thank Africa Uncensored because they're the ones who gave us all the camera work and the lighting today. So this was amazing. This is our first live recording of a podcast. So I'm very, very excited about that. I would like to thank my partner in crime, Wairimu Gadhimba, who put together this entire she deserves it because it took months to pull this together. As you know, it's not easy to get our senator here. So she managed to do that. And for that, I am eternally proud to be working with her at a Certain Amount of Madness podcast. And I would like to thank Ukombozi Library, who helped to sponsor our participation in this event here today. Thank you very much. I would like to thank the Macmillan Library that has been this wonderful space that we get to have these interesting conversations. And last but not least, I would like to thank you, Senator, for making the time this evening to be with us. This was truly an exciting conversation. And I'd like to hand over to my co-host, if you have a final word.
Nothing to add. He's already handed over the mic. I think he's done. and so all of you, I believe you have somewhere to be at this time. Thank you for giving us your time. Remember to follow a certain amount of madness, big picture on all platforms. Africa Uncensored. We have brilliant content that goes out. There's a QR code that will be available close to you. You can scan it, follow all our pages. But asanteni sana kwa kuja. Bwana Okiya, Senator, asante for making time. Brilliant conversation, guys.
Tusimame kwa wimbo wa mapambano. Kupigwa na kupokonywa maisha hakutatuzuia sisi wananchi kunyakua uhuru wetu. na haki ya jasho letu, na haki ya jasho letu. Tumekataa kupiga magoti mbele ya hawa wauaji. Bila shaka sisi pia ni watu, hali ya utumwa tumeikataa, hali ya utumwa tumeikataa. Tutanyakua mashamba yetu, tupiganie uhuru wetu, tuikomboe elimu yetu, utamaduni na viwanda vyetu, utamaduni na viwanda vyetu. Sisi hatutaki kudhulumiwa, hatutaki tena mauaji, ili kupe tuliangushe, haki na uhuru zichanue, haki na uhuru zichanue, na uhuru wetu, uhuru wetu wa Kenya tupiganie, na mashamba yetu, mashamba yetu wa Kenya tuyanyakue, na katiba yetu, katiba yetu wa Kenya tutekeleze. Holeyo, holeyo, holeyo.